Welcome everyone to CPDMED CEFC Design, Manufacturing and Entrepreneurship Series, the special season of Azadi Ka Amrut Mahotsav. 75 weeks prior to Independence Day 2022 and extending up to Independence Day 2023. We are celebrating 75 years of independence. Thank you everyone for attending the session. It is my privilege to introduce Dr. Hardik Pandya. Dr. Hardik Pandya joined the Department of Electronic Systems Engineering, DESI, at Institute of Science, Bangalore in January 2017. Before joining ISC, he worked as a postdoctoral scientist in the Department of Mechanical Engineering, Maryland Robotics Center, University of Maryland, College Park, and in the Department of Medicine, Brigham and Women's Hospital, Harvard Medical School. He obtained his PhD from Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, and his current research focuses on minimally invasive or non-invasive technologies with an emphasis on, but not limited to, cancer diagnosis, brain, breast, head and neck, ENOS, diabetes, breast cancer screening, neuroprotective therapies for acute stroke and epilepsy. His work has resulted in 12 patents, 9 filed and 3 awarded, 3 book chapters and around 50 publications in peer-reviewed journals and conferences. He is recipient of the prestigious Early Career Research Award and from the Science and Engineering Research Board, Government of India in 2017. Dr. Pandya is also serving as an executive director, advisor to 2 Indian medical technology companies. Apart from this, Dr. Hardik Pandya was always there for the incubator and the startups. Whenever the startups wanted their things to be evaluated impartially, and so we are doubly thankful for Dr. Hardik Pandya, accepting our invitation, and especially in the special season that we have. Today's title would be Advanced Microengineered Devices and Systems for Clinical Research. Very apt for the season. Thank you very much, Dr. Hardik Pandya. Over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining today. It's my pleasure to share some of the research work that we are pursuing at my department. My department is Department of Electronic Systems Engineering. It's under division of EECS, and I am also fortunate to be an associate faculty of CPDM, under the umbrella of which this TBI and this series has been sponsored. So today's title, I was interested in informing and discussing, as well as sharing with all the participants on some of the advanced microengineered devices and systems for clinically relevant projects. So what are clinically relevant projects? Projects like breast cancer, brain cancer, epilepsy, right? Some systems like tracheal inflammation, atrial fibrillation, and so on and so forth. Even the terms looks a little bit complicated or complex. When we will look into the slides and understand the research, it is not that complex. So let me start my first slide. And as you can see here, the role of medical devices in healthcare, around 1.3 hospitals bed per 1,000 people are available in our country. This is as per the information from Medical Devices Make in India, Live for Indian Healthcare. Around 0.7 doctors per 1,000 people. 18% of the projected share of communicable diseases like COVID, Zika, dengue, right? These are all called communicable diseases that can be transferred or transmitted from one person to second person. While 82% projected share of non-communicable diseases like cancer, diabetes, and other things. So what's the requirement, right? So the early screening is one of the very important requirement to diagnose a person. So early screening, a better diagnosis. If you diagnose a person at an early stage of cancer or any disease in that terms, then the treatment can start it early. All right, and if treatment is there, then the restoration can be there. Once the person is cured, it is important to monitor the person over several years of time. So the play of medical devices across the continuum increasingly leading to improved health outcomes, right? The health outcomes would be better. The reduced length of hospital stay, that means out of expenditure, pocket expenditure will be reduced. We'll have a better diagnosis and targeted treatment, reduce burden on medical resources, and increase access to the care. So this is very important to understand before we go and dive into the advanced microengineered devices. You will be surprised to know that the Indian medical industry represents just over 1.3% of global medical devices market of USD 335 billion, which is dominated by a few countries like US, Germany, France, and Japan. This is as per the BMI EPISCOM Indian Medical Devices Report 2014, and also from the Confederation of Indian Industries on Indian medical device industry. So what does it mean, right? One thing is that if you have a better policy and better ecosystem to support the medical devices, like this, one of the example is this incubator, right? Then large number of new ideas can be supported, funded, right? And we can do more in terms of getting a advanced electronic and medical devices for healthcare. So enabling policy framework and ecosystem support. So the industry estimates an indicator potential to grow at 28% to USD 50 billion by 2025. Right, this is according to the Indian medical device industries. And if you see here the compounded annual growth rate, which is right over here, let me just put the laser. It's easy to see. You see from 2008 to 2020, right? 2008, 2014, 2020. So if you see the CAGR, which is compounded annual growth rate, right, it is significantly increasing. And if you see consumable implants, which is in dark green color, from 2008 it was $0.4 billion to 0.7 in 2014 to 1.6 in 2020. Right, same thing goes for imaging, diagnostic imaging, 0.8 to 1.2 to 2.3. Same thing, instruments and appliances, 0.7 to 1.3 to 2.9, and patients' aids and others. So in all this domain, if you see the growth rate, right, is significantly increasing. Now, what are the key verticals and what are the technological challenges and research that we can put together, right, to contribute to this particular ecosystem? So there are several different verticals, starting with consumables and implants. It includes stents, it includes syringes, needles, catheters, suturing materials, bandages, and dressing. If you see, if the people who are in material science will work on new kind of materials that can help in wound healing. Right? If you see people in robotics, they will start with the robotic catheters, robotic medical devices, right, or robot-based medical devices. Mechanical engineers, designers, right, from CPDM and similar kind of centers and departments will work on new kind of stents, syringes, needles, right? Same thing goes for diagnostic imaging, right? It is electrodiagnostic apparatus, radiation apparatus, imaging parts. Example is MRI, mammography. These are in imaging. Instrument and appliances, surgical instrument, non-surgical instruments and appliances. Well, finally, patient aids and others, including hearing aids, right? Then we have prosthetics, orthotics, pacemakers, and so on and so forth. So what we understand that if you see the medical devices and equipment market, Indian medical device market, then on the y-axis you can see market size, which is in millions of dollars, while in x-axis there is a total market size. So if you see the total market size is increasing from 2018 to 2020, so is the total local production. You can see here the bar chart is in a similar kind of growth. But if you see the total exports is significantly lower, while total import is significantly higher. And we have to get the We have to remove our dependency from our import. How? By increasing the total exports. This can be done by increasing the total local production. This can be done by many entrepreneurs coming forward, right, with brilliant ideas, and that can be supported to formulate those ideas to bring it to market, right? So in a way, to today's theme, right, Azadi Ka Amrut Mahotsav, right, we also want independency from the import. We have to rely on our exports and local production to increase the share in the medical device market. Now, let us see the leading market segments, right? I have tried to put as many as it can fit in this slide. How there are many more, so you don't take this as a gold standard, all right? But some of the segments are medical infrastructure, medical surgical instruments, medical imaging, orthopedics, prosthetics, cancer diagnostics, ophthalmic, orthodontic, point of care testing, digital healthcare, and telemedicine. Some of the things that you can see in the red bold font is the systems or devices that we work in our lab at IISc. So having said that, this is what the lab research is focused on. It is focused on non-communicable diseases as well as communicable diseases. So we study different organs, right, and understand the problem, the clinical relevant problem, and try to bring a solution by fabricating microengineered devices and electronic systems, along with some kind of additive manufacturing, including subtractive manufacturing as well, right, to make a complete system. And when we talk about different organs, we will take and understand few of the things today, like brain, right? What kind of brain is the most complex organ, as you already know, but we will try to see how we can design a system that can help in tumor delineation. We will see breast cancer. Again, we will see how we can help a pathologist to make a better diagnosis. We'll talk about trachea. Trachea is nothing but a windpipe, right? There is a tracheal inflammation, and we'll see that how we can design a catheter that can understand the tracheal inflammation. We'll talk about heart disease. We'll talk about atrial fibrillation, which is one of the heart disease. We'll also talk about a bit on the cancer screening. And on the left side of the screen, which is right over here, you can see that other research area that we are focusing on, which is on cytology, understanding the morphology of cells, is the cytology. Antibiotic susceptibility, which we will talk about today. It's a very important problem from the bacterial resistance point of view, and we'll talk about what exactly antibiotic susceptibility means. We also are fabricating surgical tools and protein-protein interaction to understand the protein presence in the biological sample to quickly diagnose metastatic cancer. But if I talk about everything, right, it will require many lectures like this. So we'll focus on few of the topics for today. Having said that, when I say microengineered devices, first thing is we need to know how large is a micron. And if you see the strand of a human hair, one single hair, right, it is around 50 to 70 microns. Where if you see the pollen, right, you may know there is a pollen allergy. This pollen, if you take one single pollen and see the size, it is between 30 to 50 microns. Dust mite about 10 microns. Ragweed about 17 to 23 microns. In terms of that 1 micron, you can see one single dot here, right? And we are fabricating a microengineered devices, means the pattern or the sensors or the sensing layer or the structure in the device are of few microns in size, either in dimension. When you say dimension, that can be length or a width or a height. So we'll discuss these things. Let us start with the first application, and that will be on breast cancer diagnosis. So before we fabricate any device, before we make any system, it's very important to understand what are the clinical challenge, and also understand why we require to fabricate such a system. If there is already existing system, what are the changes that we need to make? How we will be better than the existing system? It is not a wise decision to repeat something which is already there. right? So to start with, breast cancer, if you talk about breast cancer, it is second largest cause of cancer related death in women. If you see the number of cancers worldwide in females of all ages, according to 2020 report, right, which is Globocon report 2020, breast cancer constitutes almost one quarter, which is 24.5% of total number of cancers in women. The incident rate is really high, as you can see here, 11.7%. However, the mortality rate is comparatively low, but at the same time, if you see number of deaths, 9.9 million deaths, right? That is a huge number in terms of deaths occurring due to breast cancer. And very important, what I believe, and we should all start believing, is empowering women and protecting a woman, right? And giving power to women to move ahead in society is very important. More important is not anyone should die out of cancer. And the way to do is to design a screening technique that can be screened, that can be used for screening a patient at early stage, right? I will show you the next slide, which is more surprising for you, it was for me as well, right? While I was doing research and literature survey, you can see here, before we go to the slide, just quickly let's see the anatomy of the breast. On the left side, you can see the anatomy, where you can see there is a chest wall, and there is a lobes, then there are ducts, and finally there is a nipple, right? So the lobes and ducts, finally the baby can feed the milk. And the best immune system that you can see today, which you are all protected from, is because if you are lucky to have or drink your mother's milk. There is nothing like that, right, which gives a person, a human, an amazing immune system to fight against a lot of disease, right? So this is the way the milk is secreted through the nipple, and the baby can have or can be fed. There are fat tissues. Now, if the cancer occurs in lobes, we call it as a lobular cancer. If it occurs in ducts, we call it as a ductal cancer. If it occurs lobes and ducts, we call it a mixed tumor cancer. If there is an inflammation, we call inflammatory cancer. The cancer is right on the stage where it does not move to other part of the body, we say it is a non-invasive type of cancer. When the cells dislodge from the ducts, right, like in invasive ductal carcinoma, this example, when the cells, which is the cancer, occurs in ducts and it dislodges, the cell dislodges and goes to other part of the body, then we call it as an invasive ductal carcinoma. Now, if you see in this kind of cancer types, you will see the non-invasive is about 20%, invasive is about 70 to 80%, which occurs in ducts. Invasive lobular carcinoma is about 5 to 10%. Inflammatory is 1 to 5. Pagets disease, right? This is about 1 to 4, which occurs generally in nipple. This is relatively less. And these are some of the percentage of the subtypes of breast cancer that I have placed here. Like I was talking about, if it is localized, it is non-invasive. If it can move, the cells can move from the primary site to the secondary site, right? It becomes an invasive cancer. So the point that I was making earlier is one of the slide I have. If I get time, I'll show it to you that countries, the Western countries, they have more number of incidence rate but less number of mortality. While the middle income and low income country, there is a large number of, so there is a less number of incidence but high mortality. Mortality is death. The reason being because we don't have screening done at an appropriate time. Also, we don't have the equal awareness, right? Medical or healthcare ecosystem consists of several pillars, and one of the most fundamental pillar is awareness. If you are not aware what you should do, when you should go for screening, how many years, in 1 year or 2 years, once a woman should go for MRI or mammography, right? This all things, if we are not, if we don't understand, if we are not aware, then the cases would increase and the mortality rate would not decrease. We need to reduce the mortality. Since our incidence is less, the mortality should also be less. Now, what we will be talking about, the first application is once the patient goes to a hospital and if the MRI or mammography is done, the patient is asked for the biopsy. Biopsy is taking the tissue from the suspicious region and send it to pathology to confirm whether there is cancer or not. Now, lot of time, what happens is the person who has cancer, right, should be diagnosed that he or she has cancer. But when it comes to the person or women who is normal, the result should always come as normal, right? So the diagnosis that is done in pathology, right, takes time, although it is a gold standard. Can we develop a system that can help a pathologist to make a decision a little bit faster, or to cross-check the diagnosis that he or she has done, right, with respect to the system that we are proposing? Now, having said that, what our system can do? Our system can understand the resistivity, mechanical stability, and thermal conductivity of tissues. And we also want to see whether this all three modalities has some coupling effect on the overall diagnosis. So like I said, that when there is another very important aspect of is in the surgical margin assessment. When the surgeon is going to operate, right, and he or she will remove the tissue is immediately sent to the pathologist, where the pathologist will say that yes, there is still cancer or it is normal. Based on that, this surgeon has to continue the surgery. So another point is, while doing surgery, if we want to make a tool that can be used to understand the tumor boundary, that is very important, so that they exactly know where to cut the tumor from. So we are proposing a system which is semi-automated system for tissue phenotyping. And as I said earlier, it consists of a chip, which is a microchip, that can understand the electrical, thermal, and mechanical properties. So we'll be talking about electrical and thermal properties, which we call ET studies. We'll be talking about biomedical, electrical, biomodal, electrical transport studies, and we'll also talk about electrical, thermal, and mechanical studies using this system. Now, this slide shows you a microchip. All right. This is a microfabrication process which includes a photolithography. This itself, to understand photolithography, we require 1.5 hours to 2 hours of lecture. So rather than going into this particular details of how we have fabricated sensor, you assume that there is a sensor with you. Now let us concentrate on this sensor. Okay, if you see this particular slide where my pointer is there, right? The center is a heater. The center is a heater. This 1, 2, and 3, these are thermistors. What is the role of thermistor? When there is a change in temperature, we can know via thermistor. And the thick line surrounding the heater, this one line and this one second line, right? You see there are two thick lines surrounding the heater. So these are interdigitated electrodes. What are those? Interdigitated electrodes. So you can see here in the schematic, there are interdigitated electrode, there is a micro heater, and there are RTDs or thermistor, and there is a trench. Why there is a trench? Trench is like a hole, right? Like a pit. So that when you heat this heater, this thermistor should not change the temperature. There is a reason why we don't want to do that. And if you have generally seen how we solder our sensors, by using soldering, right? Or by using wire bonding. We don't want to do that. We want to use an alternative technique which is called slide field contact. If I am sure that all of you use mobile, right? And you may have seen how the SIM card is inserted in a mobile. Can we use a similar technique to insert our microchip? And that's what it is shown here, which is called slide field contacts. Now what we do with this, okay? So this is a complete system that we have developed. These are engineering drawings, isometric view, side view, front view, top view. And then actual photograph of the system is here, which we have fabricated. This is a 3D schematic of the system. Some of you may know how to use SolidWorks, right? When you render the image and when you actually fabricate a system, there should be no difference, right? We have to reach to the things that we actually design. You can see here in this particular photos, you will see that whatever we have rendered, we tried to fabricate as close as we can with the rendered image. and then you have your UI tool, which is your user interface tool to control this particular micro actuators. So now let me tell you how this works. Right. Well, first let me play this video, and once the video is played, I'll tell you exactly how it works. Okay. Right, so what we saw, see, there is a tissue in between here, right? And one chip is in this side, another chip is on this side. And what this chip consists of? A micro heater, if you remember, right? And interdigitated electrodes. So if I apply a voltage across this tissue, what will happen? If I apply a voltage, voltage is potential difference between 2 points. So if I apply voltage across tissue, based on tissue resistance, the current will flow, isn't it? Based on tissue resistance, the current will flow, that we can measure those current. Second, if I have a heater on another side and thermistors are also there on the chip, so if I heat the tissue from one side and measure the temperature on another side, what I can understand, I have one temperature, across the tissue I have second temperature, so I can measure the thermal conductivity of tissue, isn't it? Now, if I have a force sensor, if I apply a known force, depending on the elasticity of the tissue, the force sensor will bend. And if it's a piezoresistor, what is piezoresistor? The sensor, when we apply a force, there is change in resistance, is a piezoresistor. So if I have a force sensor and apply a known force, if the resistance changes, I can correspondingly find out what is the elasticity of the tissue. These are both the micro robots, or you can say robotic hands, or you can say micro actuators. And the whole system is developed right in the laboratory. Now what you have to do, as soon as tissue is there, you place the tissue in the center, press a button, and you will get all the data, right? So this is how the tissue, this is a mastectomy, that means a complete breast is removed. We wanted to do the experiment. When you dip this whole tissue in formalin, the skin gets black, right? Don't worry about it. White color is all cancer. White color is all cancer. In this patient, the cancer was in entire breast, and that's why complete breast had to be extracted or surgically removed. From this, we take out tumor samples and the normal samples. Yes, yellowish one can be fat, and the next two tumor that can be benign or normal. We have seen with our gold standard, which is a pathologist report, whether it is a cancer, if it is cancer, which kind of cancer. Our tool is not to understand which kind of cancer. Our tool is right now designed to tell whether there is cancer or whether the tissue is normal. So what we measure through this particular system, like I was saying, if you have two temperature, you can measure temperature, thermoconductivity, you can measure impedance or electrical resistivity, and you can also measure the stiffness. So what results we got, right? So you can see here, when you heat the normal tissues, now these are 4 subjects, subject 1, patient 1, SP1, right, SP2, SP3, SP4. So these are all 4 patients. The tissues are from the single patient, the paired samples. That means that SP1 here normal and SP1 here tumor are from the same patient. The same patient, a person having cancer, we got the tumor from the same patient and normal from the same patient. So it's a paired tissue study. The study of tissue from the same patient, normal and cancer. From 4 patients, when we got these tissues, what we have studied here is that if we heat this tissue from 25 degrees to 37 degrees centigrade, the bulk resistivity of tissue changes a bit, but it is not significant. But the same thing happens when we go for cancer tissue or tumor tissues. When we heat tumor tissue from 25 degrees to 37 degrees centigrade, there is a change in resistivity which is significant. So that means that with a single tissue, rather than getting many tissues, if you take just one single tissue and you measure resistivity at 2 different temperatures, you can know whether the tissue is normal or the tissue is cancer. Isn't it very cool way of looking at the cancer in a different perspective? we are looking at the resistivity. This is a bulk resistivity. That means that when we apply a voltage across the tissue, what is the change in resistance? If you know the length, if you know the width, if you know the thickness, you can measure resistivity, right? R equals to rho L by A. Very simple. So now we have done for deparaffinized, we have done for formalin fixed tissue. Deparaffinized tissues are tissues which are embedded into a wax for long-term, into tissue bank. And formalin fixed tissues are fresh tissues which are taken out and dipped in formalin to preserve some of the properties. When you do formalin fixed, that means if you dip the tissue in formalin, the water content in the tissue reduces significantly. These are some of the studies and the results from the studies. Same thing, we have also done surface resistivity. How can we do surface resistivity? You know, there are two interdigitated electrodes, right? Let me go back to the microchip. So you know, here we have this one electrode. You can see this, you follow my laser pointer, okay? See this one, it goes here and it goes here, it ends here. Then your second one, it goes from here, it starts here, it goes all the way, it goes here and ends here, right? So you have two electrodes. So if I measure the resistivity between two electrodes when it touches the tissue, then it is a surface resistivity, right? What I mean is, you see in this case, here if you see, when it touches the tissue, when it was touching the tissue, right, like this, then we are measuring surface resistivity only from one single chip because there are two electrodes. So if I measure the surface resistivity, bulk resistivity is across the tissue, surface resistivity is on one side of the tissue. So when I measure bulk resistivity, I was able to see the change. When I measure surface resistivity, I was again able to see a significant change in the tumor samples in terms of resistivity values at two different temperatures compared to normal samples at two different temperatures, right? So this is the observation. Now thermal conductivity, what we observed is the thermal conductivity of the tumor samples and normal samples. When we compare, then the normal samples have a different kind of thermal conductivity compared to tumor samples. The tumor samples have a lower thermal conductivity compared to normal samples. The reason being that the water content will be out from the tumor samples. Tumor has more water content and also other things like lipid and collagen and other things, but compared to the normal samples. So what we observed is that the thermal conductivity of tumor sample is different than the normal sample. So we have done the electrical and thermal properties. Now we wanted to try a different scaling law that is generally used in composite materials and to use it for this particular tissues. So what you can see in this particular diagram, which is normal, and this is a fibroadenoma, which is not really cancer moving towards cancer, is a tumor. All right. So the TPEF, which is this particular image, is nothing but 2-photon excited fluorescence. Right, and we were also we also observed the SSG, not V. Actually, this is a paper. We have used the image from the paper. So the paper here is written, and SSG stands for second harmonic generation. So based on that, the authors were able to get the images, and you can here clearly see that the these normal samples, this is normal, and this is fibroadenoma, right? Tumor. The normal samples, they have longer collagen fibers. These fibers are longer, all right, and lesser in number compared to tumor. In tumor, you have short collagen fibers, and there are lot of higher number of fibers, which results in a disordered system. In this case, it is more ordered compared to the fibroadenoma. That means that we can use the scaling laws for this disordered systems. What is scaling law? Scaling law is nothing but a functional relationship between two physical quantities that scale or increase with each other over a period of time. Like I said, some of the things you should just hear and don't worry about it. I will just discuss with you what exactly scaling law and how we have used the scaling law. Now the system is similar that we have shown. Here we are looking at the impedance values of the tissue, and we are looking at what particular temperature, which we call critical temperature, the conductivity changes. So what we observe is the conductivity of the tissue as 25 degrees centigrade normal and tumor, at 37 degrees centigrade normal and tumor. These are raw data. And at different frequencies, 15 kilohertz to 3 megahertz, again normal and tumor, the normalized thermal conductivity. The reason of using the 15 kilohertz as well as 3 megahertz is that to cover the entire region of AC conduction for the majority of tumor and normal samples respectively. Now, once we have this raw data, what we did is we used the scaling law, which is generally used for composite materials, and we fitted this data. You can see here one of the values here, and we found out what is the critical temperature and what is the onset frequency. Onset frequency, what is it? Frequency that at which the conductivity of the sample start increasing significantly. And in another way, the reason of this particular plots, right? The blue one is the normal and red one is the tumor. So the shorter lengths of conducting filaments enables the electron to transfer energy more effectively to the next filament at higher frequencies in case of tumor. Since your tumor has shorter lengths, and that's why the tumor samples have earlier onset of the enabled AC conduction, as you can see here, compared to the normal. What does it mean? I am again maybe reiterating that the tumor has a shorter wavelength, shorter length of the fibers, collagen fibers, and it is more disordered. That disorderedness and shorter lengths of fibers helps in a better AC conduction, resulting in lower onset frequencies compared to the normal tissue. This is what we have observed. While in case of critical temperature, you can see here a temperature after which the conductivity significantly reduces. In this case, you can see at 37 degrees centigrade the conductivity of tumor sample starts reducing, but for the normal sample it is still not reducing. It goes below above 40. We restricted the plot till 38, and we found that using the scaling law we can easily understand, if we know the onset frequency and the conductivity from which the onset frequency and the critical temperature, which is TC, we can delineate normal from tumor. Delineate is differentiate. So the reason at which the critical temperature, the critical temperature is temperature at which the collagen fiber starts degrading, resulting in the lowered volume fraction. Since you can see here that the critical temperature for tumor is lower compared to normal, the reason behind is that the tumor stem tissues already have higher extent of degradation and disordered, they have lower critical temperature than normal. Now, once we do that, we also have seen to use SVM classifier, right, the support vector machine, and you can see here using this classifier we were able to observe that 100% tumor samples we can address using this particular technique. However, normal we had to improve because around 16.7% were considered as cancer. However, this is okay. You can identify some normal subjects as cancer, but none of the cancer subjects would be wrongly identified. So true predictive rate and false negative rate. So true positive rate and false negative rate. The true positive rate for tumor should be 100%. False negative rate for tumor should be 0, which we have observed. But the true predictive rate for normal is 83.3%. False negative rate is 16.7%. In even easier terms, this false negative rate shows that this particular subject is having tumor, which is not the case. All right, which can be further identified. So the point is we have to improve this thing further so as to reach the ideal condition of 100% when we go for normal as well. We can do that once we increase the sample size. Right now we have done study for about 30 subjects. We have to increase to few hundreds, probably to close to 1,000 to get the data and move this thing to the translational market or into the path lab. Now, further I told you, right, we have done electrical and thermal. If we want to also understand the mechanical phenotyping, now what we have done is we have these three sensors here. The sensor 2 and sensor 3 are for electrical and thermal, as you know. The sensor 1 is a force sensor. So when you apply a known force, if the sensor changes its piezoresistivity, the resistance would change, and corresponding resistance we can measure to understand the stiffness of tissue. And what we observe is, when we observe the impedance, which is the electrical resistivity, the tumor has a higher impedance. When you look at the thermoconductivity, the tumor has a lower thermoconductivity. When we look at the mechanical stiffness, the tumor has a higher mechanical stiffness, using this electrothermomechanical phenotyping of breast tissues, right? So this is a micro that we have used to understand the stiffness. You can see here this particular chip, that you can see the square shaped chip, has a boron diffuse piezoresistor. Okay, so when we do design a piezoresistor, we have to go for diffusion technique. There are two techniques to diffuse the boron into silicon. For those who are from electronics background, you may have learned about MOSFET. In MOSFET, you have learned about source and drain. These source and drain are created using ion implantation or diffusion technique. Doping a contaminant into a silicon wafer is called diffusion, right? Or is that diffusion and ion implantation techniques are used for doping the contaminant. So this is the same technique by which we dope boron into the silicon wafer to create a piezoresistive sensor. Now the backside of this sensor, there is a diaphragm. So if I apply a force, there will be strain here, and which will cause change in the resistance of the piezoresistor. Now if I place a tissue and apply a force, the force that I am applying and the force that sensor will observe depends on the tissue elasticity. The tissue is in between the indenter and the sensor, isn't it? Like this. You see, this is an indenter, this is a tissue. So if I apply a known force, I will see what is the change in the force resistance values. So having said that, what we observed is that adding all three parameters, thermal, electrical and mechanical, impedance, which is Z, thermoconductivity and the mechanical stiffness, we were able to significantly delineate normal tissues from tumor in the given sample or from a given sample. So this is the technique that we are using. We are in progress. We have filed a patent. We have filed a PCT. We have submitted 2-3 papers which has been accepted. I'll show you the list of publications out of this work and other work in next few minutes. Let me go to the next problem, and that is on clinical challenge, which is the cardiac ablation. So let me talk about the atrial fibrillation. Now everybody knows that our heart pumps regularly, right? And everybody has a heart, isn't it? So if everybody has a heart and everybody's heart is pumping regularly, sometimes you see that heart starts pumping unevenly. Sometimes it pumps very fast. When it pumps very fast, if you have submitted the paper and the reviewer sends a comment and you see the email, the reviewer comments are back, your heart starts pumping faster, right? Or when you do a physical exercise, when you run, right, your heart starts pumping faster. And there are many more examples where heart starts pumping faster. You guys are smart enough to understand at what point of time in your life your heart starts pumping faster. The point here is that fast pumping is okay, not when I'm talking here, right? When I'm delivering this lecture, you should not see that, or my heart should not start pumping faster. There is no reason, right? There is no reason. So without reason, if the heart starts pumping faster, then it is called arrhythmia. And when the heart starts pumping unevenly means faster, slower, regular, faster, slower, regular, suddenly faster, suddenly slower, only faster. This causes this particular effect or a disease is called atrial fibrillation. This atrial fibrillation occurs because of the non-uniform electrical conductivity in the AV node into the heart. So the electrical signals that are sent will help the heart to pump, right? Now, how to cure it? This uneven beating of heart, how to cure it? The one way is to take medicine. But if still it is not cured, the surgeon has to operate the patient. So to operate the patient, first the electrical stimulation, because we need to know where is this electrical mapping, in which region of the heart these electrical signals are misfiring. right? So for that, they insert a tube called catheter inside the body and understand or locate the electrical mapping of the heart tissue. From there, they will know that, okay, this is the region where the electrical signals are uneven, and they remove this catheter and put another catheter and burn the tissue. Burning. If you burn the tissue, it will stop conducting. If it is stop conducting, you can regain the normal activity of heart. I am not saying burn the entire heart, okay? And it is not heart burning. It is different terms. Please understand this thing. We are ablating or hitting a certain area of the tissue, of the heart tissue, which was causing misfiring of signal. By burning that particular area, you can regain the heart rhythm. And the technique to do that is called cardiac ablation. Ablation is nothing but hitting. By hitting, you can burn the tissue. These two commercial catheters you can see. The first one is Tachycath, where you have a force sensor. Now, one more thing that I forgot to tell you is that you can use RF frequency to ablate the tissue. So when you want to apply a radio frequency, you have to touch the tissue, isn't it? When you touch the tissue, if the force is higher, the other part of the tissue will burn, which is not desirable. If the force is less, then the complete tissue is not burned, and the person will have recurrence. Reoccurrence is also not desirable. So to measure the contact force when the catheter is inserted in the heart is a very important problem. And more importantly is that there is no haptic feedback to these catheters. So we were thinking, and we now have designed a catheter, or we are designing a catheter, I should say, by using some advanced force sensor to understand the catheter contactive force. I'll show you in few slides. The one that you can see here is based on the optical fibers, and it's a commercially available catheter without haptics. It's called Tachycath. While you have seen here is another commercial catheter called Thermocool ablation catheter from Biosense Webster, California. Challenges with this one is the sensor resolution and hysteresis required further improvement. There is no haptic feedback. Same thing goes for here. The detection range is limited. The optimum force that electrophysiologist has to apply, right, would be around 0.4 grams, 0.3 to 0.4 grams of force. More force causes other tissue to burn. Less force causes the recurrence. So you can see here a catheter that we have designed is a complete catheter, and the tip of this catheter, this tip, which is this one, the small tip, this tip has this force sensor that we are talking about, and it has a entire hole into it, central hole. The central hole that we have created is for the irrigation type of catheter. There are two types of catheter. One is irrigation type, second is non-irrigation type. Irrigation type of catheter is when we can pass the saline solution through the catheter, through this tube which is central hole, and non-irrigation type is where you cannot pass the saline solution. There are reasons of using saline versus non-saline that we can discuss in detail offline. So what I was talking is about the force sensor that is integrated onto this particular catheter tip. You can see here, this is a force sensor with 4 bridges. Each bridge will have 4 different piezoresistors. So when you apply a normal force, what is a translational force or a force with an angle, right, or a shear force, you should be able to see the change in the piezoresistance. Now, for which we have again designed a process flow, and finally we were able to create this force sensor. You can see a force sensor next to one send, and here the force sensor is connected to a PCB using wire bonding. Here you cannot use a fit contact, press fit contact, because the contact pads are extremely small. Okay. And the way to create this again is using boron diffusion. The piezoresistor is created using boron diffusion, and the contact pads for the piezoresistor are using highly doped boron. Again, like I said, to understand lithography is a different topic and different lectures that we require, in a set of lectures that we require. So we will see about it if there is a provision to take set of lectures to understand lithography and techniques for the same. I'll be happy to take those lectures separately. However, focusing on the current topic, once you have force sensors, you have to understand its properties, right? How good your sensitivity is, how repeatable the sensor is, what is the hysteresis, and so on and so forth. So this is an experimental setup that we have in the lab here in my department, and we have 3 labs. One is for fabrication, one for characterization, one for experiment with clinical samples, and one for student to do the computational studies and other things. So this tip is connected to a micromanipulator, and then we indent this tissue, indent this sensor. You can see that the indentation is on the 4 sensor. Each bridge we can indent it. When you indent it correspondingly, you will see the change in the resistance of the piezoresistor. You can see at different indentation, you have different resistance change. These are delta R by R change that we are showing. These are all wire bonded sensors. You can see here the wire bonding, right, for each pad. There is a wire bonding here also. This is just an optical illusion that you see that there is no wire. Wire is here like this. So finally, what we want to do, we want to test it with the tissue, right? So before going to human tissues, we have used porcine tissues or pig's heart tissue. So to do that, we have created a PCB. We created this casing into which we have stuffed the sensor, integrated the sensor, and the sensor is pressed onto this porcine heart tissue, and correspondingly the results are obtained. We are also developing the haptics, like I said, and there is a ring here that we have designed this whole casing. So when you apply a force, the force goes through the ring onto all the bridges uniformly, because you can see here this ring is there, right? So when you apply a force, the entire ring will press 4 sides of the sensor. Which 4 sides? Is all 4 bridges uniformly. It will press, and when you press all 4 bridges, you will see change in the resistance values. So that is what we are looking at here. At a different angle, you can see only few resistors would change, other resistors would not change, because that force is applied on with an angle. This is the next step that we are working on designing the catheter. You can see here, and this is the work in progress. These are the casing. There is a sensor that you need to integrate, which you can see here. This is just a casing here. The sensor is here, and the entire setup is connected to a micromanipulator. Once we are now using the human heart to understand. We have ethereal clearance for using pig's heart. We have ethereal clearance for using human heart. And once we get enough data, we can design the catheter for further studies. Right now, since we are designing the catheter and we are talking about the catheter, let me go to the another topic or another application. This is called clinical challenges, tracheal stenosis. So what exactly stenosis is? Stenosis is nothing but a narrowing of the windpipe. Windpipe, right? There is a food pipe and a windpipe. When the windpipe is narrowed down, or there is because of inflammation, is called stenosis. Now, there are certain terms that you will see here. Central airway obstruction. Central airway is this airway. If there is obstruction, is called stenosis. And then there are certain way that person can acquire this. One is the congenital, which is anatomy or syndrome. Another one is acquired, which is acute, chronic, benign or malignant. Congenital is from birth. We cannot do anything except that we can treat the patient. Acquire is because of lot of problems. One problem can be on the ventilator. When an infant is on ventilator, generally it is observed that the trachea inflames. The trachea inflames, the air passing through the trachea would be less, and that's why there is a breathing problem. So within the central or airway obstruction, and we talk about congenital, there are tracheal stenosis, tracheomalacia, tracheal agenesis, and laryngomalacia cleft. Right. So what are these techniques? So tracheomalacia is nothing but flaccidity, or flaccidity in synonym of flaccidity is softening of supporting tracheal cartilage. The tracheostomy, right, that we will be using will be a surgical procedure when an opening is created. We'll talk about it later. And then we have in the right side, we have post-intubation stenosis. Right, stenosis is nothing but narrowing of the trachea. And then we have tracheostomy. Tracheostomy means the surgical procedure when an opening is created in the windpipe. I'll show you the figure. Then there is a long-term ventilation, and then there is infection. So as you see here, as the airway diameter is narrowed down, generally the airway diameter, if I give you the values, the tracheal diameter in children is about 8 millimeter to 15 millimeter, while in the tracheal length is about 10 centimeter. And the so this is the parameters that we need to understand before we design our catheter, or we design something that can help to diagnose this particular tracheal inflammation. Now you can see as the tracheal diameter decreases, the airway resistance increases, right? So you can see here there is a cuff stenosis, Then there is stromal stenosis, and then there is the Malaysia. There is a cricoid. Cricoid is the ring-shaped cartilage, right, which is the ring-shaped cartilage here. And then you have the TEF. TEF stands for tracheoinhumate artery fistula. Don't worry about it. Again, a lot of things ignore. Okay, don't worry at all. You have to think about that there is a problem, how to address those problems. While you work on the problem, automatically you will know all these terms, right? So this we have TIF and we have TEF, which is your tracheoesophageal fistula, which is nothing but abnormal connection between esophagus and trachea. So TEF is an abnormal connection between the esophagus and the trachea. Esophagus is nothing but food pipe. And when you say TIF, in very simple term, it is the abnormal connection between the artery and the trachea, which should not happen. So there are several things that is there, and based on the diameter of the trachea, the grades are there. You can see grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. All right, and 0 to 50% is grade 1, and so on for grade 2, 3, and 4. So what are the current technologies? The current technologies are evaluation and the characterization of stenosis using endotracheal tubes. The surgeon will place the tube and it inflate this particular balloon so that there is no passing of wind through it or the air through it. Only through the ventilator, the person is given air and the exhale air passes through this tube. All right, endotracheal tubes. Second is Kirschner wire. These wires are directly placed. These are, if you see, there is a L shape, right? This is an L shape on both the sides. So when they place, they know the length and they know what is the length of this L rod. And based on that, they will know what is the diameter. When say there is the surgeon will know what is the diameter of the trachea. A very crude technique, as you can see here, isn't it? The last one is bronchoscope, through which the imaging can be done. And the difficulty of the endotracheal tube here is that it is needs interchanging of tubes multiple times to give a crude estimate of degree. Here it is a measuring stick needs to be swept until right fit is determined. First one, second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one, until you know what is the diameter. And for here you can see it based on the expertise of a surgeon, the narrowing of the tube or the trachea is classified. However, generally optical distortions may lead to imprecise measurement. So all these current technologies suffers with certain kind of limitations. So what, and then there is some diagnosis also. How you diagnose whether a person is having a breathing problem? One is a pulmonary function test, where a person is asked to breathe in and we can see what is the lung capacity. This is similar to spirometer. Then there is a bronchoscopy, as I was telling you earlier, imaging can be done. Then this is the tracheostomy, where I told you that the surgical procedure where an opening is made. Here you can see there's an opening is made, right, to create a windpipe for tube insertion. So since this is damaged, right, we have to make the surgeon has to make an opening to connect the remaining trachea. And of course, there is a radiological scans, right? So not all these techniques are complicated. As you can see, the challenges are many. First is it requires general anesthesia, bronchoscopy, because we are talking about infants, right? Infants, they will move. We have to give anesthesia. Second is patient cooperation is required. You breathe in, you breathe out. Third thing is sometimes a child is incorrectly diagnosed with severe asthma when they really have the tracheomalacia. And there is an inflammation of the windpipe, but a child cannot breathe. And what is the diagnosis? Oh, yeah, the certain person is having a asthma. But there is no asthma, it is a tracheomalacia. So how to do that? And that's why it's very important to have a physician with a lot of experience, as per Boston Children's Hospital document. And further, there is a lot of challenges in this particular case, as you can see here. I'll not go through the detailed flow chart of this. The point is we require a certain catheter that can do this study in a very easy and effective way. What we came up with? We came up with a tube, which is your catheter, right, made up of the silicone. And if you further do the blown up diagram, you will see there is a PCB integrated onto this, and there are 4 flow sensors here. Flow sensors are nothing but heater. So now if you place the tube inside the trachea, based on the flow rate of the air, right, breathing and exhaling and inhaling, the temperature of the sensor would change, and from that you may know that which particular region in the trachea is inflamed, right? In fact, you can know with precision about particular cartilage or between two cartilages the trachea is inflamed. You can see here, these are the cartilages, right? These are like this ring shape. So we have designed this particular catheter. Now you have to maneuver the catheter. Maneuver is moving the catheter. So if you have to maneuver the catheter, we have at the end the smart actuator, which is called memory alloy, and it is of nitinol. So we have done the catheterization so that when you hit the tube, right, or hit the SMA, it will maneuver in one particular direction, and when you cool it down and hit the SMA, which is on opposite side of the heater of the PCB, it will start maneuvering in another direction as desired. So these are the microreactors that we have fabricated. You can see in 1 4-inch wafer you have hundreds of microheater that you can fabricate. This is the PCB that you can see. It's a flexible PCB, and there is a E and IG contact on which we have done wire bonding, and this wire bonding is topped with epoxy. To start with, we use injection molding of small parts of the PCB. Now once we got enough data, we are going to go for a complete length of the catheter. The length of our catheter, because I told you the trachea diameter in children is 8 to 15 millimeter. The tracheal length is 10 centimeter. Our catheter length is about 30 centimeter, and the diameter of our catheter is 4 millimeter, which is good enough for placing inside the trachea of a children or an infant. So we have used this trachea. As you can see, we have started with sheep trachea because this is where we got the ethical clearance before we go for humans. So these are trachea, or you can see a windpipe, and we inserted the catheter and we created a stenosis manually, and we were able to see that when we create a stenosis, see there is only one single stenosis here, there is two stenosis here, there is three stenosis here. You can clearly see the difference in the signature from the catheter. We were also doing inspiration expiration experiment using the experimental setup that we have. We have also designed a force sensor, as you can see here, which can be connected to the tip of the catheter, and we are able to see when you do the dynamic load testing, it is quite repetitive at different load conditions. We are now in the doing the experiments of understanding the hysteresis for cranial cartilage, cadular cartilage, median cartilage, and smooth muscle. And you can see here a different portion. When we do that, we can clearly see the force values for each region is different. And this, of course, because it's a tissue, the hysteresis curve would not exactly follow. It will take some time to go reach back to its original shape. These are all studies that are done by my students, as you can clearly understand, right? Faculty can only guide. I want to go to the lab and do a lot of studies and experiment with them. Whenever I get time, I spend time in the laboratory. However, whenever I don't get time, I at least make sure that I can spend time with them to guide them. So this is about the trachea. Now, if Srinivas will allow me, I want to quickly talk about the brain cancer, quickly, epilepsy and brain cancer, and then I'll stop my talk if I can get some time. Is it okay, Srinivas?
Yes, please. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. So let us talk about now few of the brain computational devices, right? A lot of you would be interested in a research area which we talk about brain. So there are several things in brain, guys. First one is epilepsy. Epilepsy is the you have seen is called fit in a common man terms, right? When a person severs, right, and there is a vibration. So that is because of the misfiring of the electrical signals in the brain. Now there can be different kind of epilepsy: focal epilepsy, generalized epilepsy, focal to generalized epilepsy, and the way to measure epilepsy is using 10-20 system, which is the EEG electrodes. There is epilepsy in which generally epilepsy is treated using the anti-epileptic drugs. However, epilepsy called intractable epilepsy, a surgeon has to remove the part of the brain which is causing this particular epileptic episode, which is causing the electrical misfiring. That is a very tricky thing, because this particular region of the brain is connected with other body functions like visual, right, like speech and a lot of other things. So it is an awake craniotomy that a person performs. You may have seen some news that a person is playing guitar and the surgery is going on. Why the person is asked to play guitar? Not to have fun during surgery, no, just to make sure that when they remove that part of the brain, the part that they are playing is not affecting any motor skills or speech or memory of the person. So that is called awake craniotomy and surgery. However, we are interested in many things. So this is about the epilepsy. We are also interested in developing a probe that can delineate normal from tumor. I'll give an example right over here. You see this whole screen, okay? Whole screen is your brain, and the tumor is this area, the brain computational devices. This region is tumor, this circle. So what does surgeon do? You have any idea? See, this surgeons will make sure that they remove this part of the brain. You can follow my laser pointer. This much part of the brain they remove, just to make sure that the cancer is completely out. Now, when they increase this part, the part they are removing also consists of normal regions. And normal regions are again associated with our motor skills, speech, our visual, and a lot of other activities, right? So what we want to design is a probe that can delineate, that can find this tumor boundary. Right now they do this so to make sure the complete cancer is out. How about we create a tool that can get as close as this tumor is, so as to not allow the surgeon or help surgeon not to, we cannot allow anyone, the surgeon not to remove the normal region from the brain. So we are developing this smart probe. Again, let me just quickly tell you that the earlier two catheters that we are talking about, we have filed an Indian patent, we have filed a PCT, and there are publications resulted from that particular work. I'll show it to you. Now you can see here needles, and you can see here flexible electrodes. I'll go into each of those quickly. You can see here when it comes to human brain tissues, there are several regions that we say. This is a frontal region, and this is a temporal region, this is central region, this is occipital region, which is related to your side, head, and many more. On which the EEG is measured as F frontal electrodes, C central electrode, O occipital electrode, T temporal electrode, and so on and so forth. Now there is a metastatic tumors. Primary, as I told you earlier in breast cancer, it only is from it originates from one particular site and it stays there. Metastatic is originated in that particular site, or it comes from different sites and creates a tumor in brain. All right. So higher incidence in brain is because of metastatic. Say, let's say somebody has a breast cancer or lung cancer, the cell will dislodge and create a tumor in brain. There is a higher number of cases. Now, the gliomas are a cancer, glioblastoma again a cancer, and so is a meningioma as well as schwannoma. What we want to do is we want to develop a smart probe for brain tumor delineation, and this probe tip can consist of acoustic sensor, mechanical sensor, there is again stiffness, and electrical sensor. Acoustic is similar to ultrasound sensor. So we are trying to develop an array of PMUs. PMUs stands for piezoelectric micro machine ultrasound transducers. Until now, what we have designed, piezoelectric resistors or piezoresistive devices. Piezoresistive is when you apply pressure, there is change in resistance. Piezoelectric is when you apply pressure, there is change in voltage, right? So there is a difference. This is what we learned in 12th science. Everything is useful. So here, what is the objectives, or what are the objectives? The objectives are design and fabrication of microsensor to understand electrical, mechanical, and acoustic characterization, design development of automated system to understand. So before we go to in vivo system, who will allow you to go for in vivo system? You have to first show the data from the ex vivo. Now there are three terms: in vivo, within the body; ex vivo, outside the body; in vitro, when you develop cells in the laboratory. All right, in a very simple terms, I told you three different things. Now first we have to understand the change in the this tissue properties, brain tissue properties, human brain tissue properties in the ex vivo mode, outside the brain, right? When they do the surgery, you want to see how this property changes, and then move towards developing a probe that can be used for the in vivo studies. So with that purpose, if you see a brain, this is actually a photo from my collaborator. I'll show you the list of collaborators with which we collaborate at the end of the presentation. This is how the brain looks like, and this is where the tumor lies. Very difficult to identify, very difficult job of removing tumor. So tumor diagnosis can be done using grading, chemotherapy, there is the imaging, MRI, fMRI, DTI, PET, ultrasound, and DES, direct electrical stimulation, ECOG, electrocardiography, Raman spectroscopy, fluorescence imaging, and chemotherapy and radiation. After this is done, awake craniotomy, as I told you, the person is awake, during which this thing is done, and possibly the surgery is also done. So do we have any commercial tools like this? Yes, we have. We have intraoperative MRI. As you can see here, very few hospitals can afford this intraoperative MRI, and the difficulty here is that there is a brain shifting. What's the brain shifting? Once you open the skull, not you means surgeon, right? You should not open the skull, neither should I. A surgeon should open a skull, surgeon should do the surgery. We should do the technology and science. So when surgeon opens the skull, what first thing comes is a dura. Dura is a layer. And you open the layer, then there is a CSF. CSF stands for cerebrospinal fluid. So when they do MRI, MRI is done before the surgery. When they operate the patient, the CSF comes out. Because CSF comes out, there is a pressure difference. Because there is a pressure difference, the brain slightly shifts. And when actually the MRI, you were seeing the region, that region cannot be exactly seen because it has moved slightly during the surgery. So there is a difficulty, right, to identify where exactly the tumor is. Second is portability is very low. Can you make this portable? Can you bring from one hospital to second hospital? Almost impossible. Second is the cost, very high. Ease of use, medium. This is according to the surgeon. Raman spectroscopy, excellent in low-grade tumor delineation, but it is real-time and rapid. Rapidity is not there because point by point you have to do Raman spectroscopy. Portability is low, cost is high, ease of use is a little bit high because expert is required. Fluorescence requires a secondary agent, so it's not label-free. You also need to, it's not real time. Yeah, it is a real time rapid, but it requires external agents, as I have told you. Portability is high, cost is low, ease of use is high. So the smart probe that we are developing is to make sure that most of the things that are limitation we can overcome, except we don't know the ease of use, because until a surgeon uses or many surgeons use it, we don't know the ease of use factor in this particular slide, right? There is a smart probe that you can see. There is an array of micro machine ultrasound transducer. We are developing this. We are also developing this entire UI system so that surgeon can use it by just plugging into the system and understand the electrical properties, mechanical properties, and acoustic properties. Some engineering drawings. I don't want to go in detail about this. So what are the physical properties of the tissue, human brain tissues that we are measuring? We are measuring electrical properties, as I told you earlier, impedance or resistivity. We are measuring acoustic properties. We are measuring mechanical properties like stiffness, viscoelasticity. In acoustic properties, we want to see attenuation, speed of sound. If we are successful in designing an array of PMUDs very close to each other and high density of PMUDs, we can also go for imaging. So this is an actual data from the human brain tissue. You can see here we have got the human brain tissue and we have sliced it. After slicing it, we have got data from different regions of human brain tissues using the system developed in my department, or I should say in my lab, right? And here there are two chips. There's two chips. Between there is a tissue. When you press this tissue, you will know the electrical properties. Similar to our earlier concept of electrical, thermal, and mechanical. Here we are doing electrical, thermal, and acoustic. These are tumor tissues. It is a fresh tissue study that we have done. We have also done the tissues with formalin fixed. So we can see here that the signature is almost constant. However, the resistivity of the tissue is increasing with respect to the formalin fixation. You can see the normal tissues have a higher resistivity compared to fresh tissues, and so is the case for the in the fresh tissues, the normal resistivity is significantly different than tumor samples, and so is the case for 1 week fixation and 6 month fixation. This fixation is done using formalin chemical. And the another point of interest is that we were able to understand the difference between white matter and gray matter. We were able to delineate the normal region from tumor using the ex vivo tissues. We have also designed this force sensor. In this case, in any case, you will see the similar kind of design is there, right? But when you actually see this resistance or the design within the sensor is very different. You can see here, this is a optical photograph of the boron diffused sensor into silicon, and then this is a section where we attach a force sensor. Very interesting. We have filed a patent on this also. You can see here, there is a force sensor is here. This is an M shape. This is an M shape, right? And then this is a thread. Now there is a spring here, and there is a screw that you can put here. So when you screw it further, there is a known force that you apply to this sensor, right? You are applying a known force. Now when you press this M against the tissue, depending on the tissue stiffness, this M will come up. This will come up, and the known force will change, right? So the preloaded force will change depending on the tissue stiffness. This helps our sensor to be used for large range. You can see until 2 newtons we were able to see, right? So you know that 0.1 newton is 10 grams. So you understand that how much our sensor can bear the force. And of course, there is a related electronics for the same. These are some of the results from motor cortex, gray region, white region, frontal cortex, sensory cortex, and glioma. We are further understanding, but you can see here the stiffness of the glioma is different compared to the stiffness of the normal region, and our study is going on. I'll quickly move to my last section of the presentation. Is an epilepsy. I can again talk for 2 more hours. I have so many things to show it to you. But respecting the time that is allocated, I'll finish by discussing this particular section. This is the lab that I have at Department of Electronic System Engineering. There's a nanofab that also I have. Some of the students that I have trained in last few years. Currently, my lab has 24 students with 11 PhD and 2 postdocs and several project assistants. These are my clinical collaborators, right from neurosurgery, cardiology, ENT, neonatology, psychology, and oncology. About 22 clinical collaborators, surgeons, one of the champions in their own field. I really had to, these all things will not be possible without the funding. So thanks to all the funding agency who believed in our idea, who supported us. Finally, these are some of the references where I have taken the images from during this presentation, and these are some of the recent publications. Some of the papers that you can see are under review, while these are already published papers. These are all the research work that we have done in last 4.5 years at IISc. Thank you very much. I'm open to any questions or discussion. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you. Such a beautiful, knowledgeable content about diagnosing cancers and all that. And I have seen most of your presentation today, but I would like to ask, is there any kind of incision required to diagnose all this kind of cancerous cells in our body?
Yeah, Ashutosh, there is no universal system that can measure all kind of cancers, but there is a way to treat by understanding the protein present in the biofluid. What we are working on is one of the technique by which you take the biofluid during the surgery, and you will know whether the cancer is metastatic or not. That is one thing. As far as my understanding goes, I have not seen or come across any device that can be used for diagnosing all kind of cancers. This is my limited understanding, but that is what I can say.
The question that I was asking is that, is there any requirement of incision in your probes to diagnose all this a particular kind of cancerous cell?
Incision these are all minimally invasive devices, right? So I don't want, and actually we are not looking at cells. If you're seeing, we are looking at the tissue properties. So when we go for single cell study, it is different than tissue properties, and that's why my devices are not focused on understanding cell properties. If you have more questions, please feel free to send me an email, and we can also have a separate discussion. Yeah.
Okay, so please drop your email address in the chat box, so that we can contact in future with you.
Yeah, I will do that. I cannot share my PPT unfortunately because it's a research work that is ongoing, so it will be difficult. I have shared my email ID. Please do make sure that send me only very important questions, right? Otherwise, it will be too difficult to answer all the questions. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I can take another question.
Mr.
Thank you, sir.
Sohan? Mr. Sohan Pujari, please go ahead.
Good evening, sir. Hello.
Good
Hello.
evening.
Yeah,
Please go
good
ahead.
evening. Good evening, Swank. Go ahead.
It was a very informative session, sir. Can you explain more about the shape memory alloy, mainly with the material that you have used?
Yeah, so this is nitinol. Nitinol is known as a shape memory alloy. It is available in market. So you have to train the material before you start using the material. For example, if I convert the or shape the, if I have a spring shape and I make this straight wire of nitinol into spring shape, heat at a certain temperature to train it, and then I straighten it up and load into a system. Whenever there is a heat, it will again start shrinking and coming back to its original shape, which it was trained for. So that is called retaining the memory, and that's why it's called shape memory alloy. There are different states in the shape memory alloy: austenite state, melanite state, and so on and so forth. So for our work, we had made this single wire into spring shape, and we have trained it so that whenever we apply certain heat, it will get straightened, and when we cool it down, to come back to its original state. That helped us to maneuver the catheter. So for now, I can say this much, because I think I should give chance to other people as well. So is it fine?
Okay, sir. I'll mail whatever questions I have. Whatever.
Absolutely.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Otherwise, I have a small announcement to make. For the devices that Dr. Hardik Pandya spoke about, I would like you people, especially those of the Azadi Amrit Mahotsav research interns and the knowledge interns, to prepare a process map for Industry 4.0. How you would, in simple things, how would you deliver this using the device using Industry 4.0? Is that clear? Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, it is clear.
Thank you. Right. Now, if any questions, now you may ask. If there are no questions, I know that it is a heavy subject. You need some time even to ask a question.
Yeah, but I think when you start doing research, right, when you get into things, this will comparatively become easy. At this point of time, it may be a little bit overwhelming, right? The reason of today's presentation was not to bog you with lot of topics, but to show you that once you learn a certain technique, you can make several kind of devices. When you learn electronic system, when you learn additive manufacturing, whatever you learn as a part of this Industry 4.0 training that you will be getting, right, you can utilize it for several applications. But the one most important thing that you should notice, and I should tell, is work in collaboration, right? First, only one person with one expertise or set of expertise would be less successful rather than a team. So the gist should be a mechanical engineer should work with electronics engineer, computer scientist, with a biologist, and with doctors, and then we work together. Then you come out with some things that can be really translated. Yeah. So that is my few points.
Verma?
Good evening, sir. Very nice informative talk, sir. Sir, I want to know what are the expectations from intern or research students if we want to join your group? Currently, sir, I am going to complete my MTech second year in bioelectronics.
I think you're on mute, Dr. Hardik.
Yeah. So generally, I give 6 months internship, not 1-2 months internship. That's why if you see for the summer internship, I have not kept my name. Right. The reason being that the research that I am right now pursuing requires both me as well as a student to understand each other, to understand the topics that we are working on, to understand the ecosystem that we have, and then to collaborate. collaborate and contribute. So in 2 months, neither you can do anything nor I can teach you anything. So there is one thing about the internship. Also, there is a limited number of internship that I can provide. Now, when I say internship, one thing, let me make it very clear on this on record, that I cannot sign any of your project thesis, because I am a faculty here and you are not student from IISc. And same thing, you have to have a guide in your institute. But I can provide the facility for you to work in my lab. Regarding project assistant or associateship, depending on the project, right? Generally, I look for electronics engineer. For example, if there is an electronics engineer right now, right, who knows embedded design, who knows programming, who knows electronic module design, I can hire as of today. If you apply today, I'll hire tomorrow. So I have funding, but we go through a little bit rigorous process so as to make sure that when you join the lab, you should not feel an odd person out of the lab, right? And vice versa. When you join lab, you should also not feel where are you, and when I should not feel who I am working with. So we go through 2-3 steps of interviews, and then if you are good, I'll be very happy to work with you.
Thank you very much.
Super.
Thank you, everyone. And as we are running out of the time, I would like to call this session. I know all the good things have to come to an end, and you people are very eager to work with Dr. Hardik Pandya. I see that. And any queries and other things, you may send offline, and especially don't forget the reports. And do more research. Let me tell you something a bit of Dr. Hardik Pandya, if Dr. Hardik Pandya permits, that before putting a question, make sure that you do your basic research, think scientifically, and then pose the question. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Hardik Pandya.
Yeah.
It is a pleasure to have you on the session. After a long time on persuasion, I could get you. I'm very happy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, bye for now. Bye.